In one night, Ragnar Lothbrok killed more men than most warriors slay in a lifetime. 40 English soldiers fell to his axe alone, while his 9 companions turned 180 enemies into corpses. This is how legends are born in blood. This is the story of the single most brutal night in Viking history, when 10 warriors became living nightmares and Ragnar Lothbrok carved his name into legend with an axe dripping in enemy blood. Lord Elred's camp was supposed to be impregnable. 180 of England's finest soldiers, fortified behind wooden walls, positioned on high ground with clear sightlines in every direction. The English had grown confident after months of successful raids against scattered Viking forces. Their camp had become a symbol of English military dominance, a fortified position that no Viking force had dared to attack directly. The perfect target. What Lord Elred didn't understand was that he had created the perfect opportunity for a warrior who thought differently than other men. While every Viking leader saw an impossible fortress, Ragnar Lothbrok saw 180 enemies trapped in one place, unable to escape or call for reinforcements. The fortress that was meant to protect them would become their tomb. Most warriors avoid fighting at night. The darkness makes coordination impossible, increases the chance of friendly casualties, and eliminates the psychological advantage of visible numbers. But Ragnar Lothbrok had spent decades mastering something his enemies feared, turning darkness into the ultimate weapon. Tonight, he would prove that 10 warriors who owned the night were worth more than 180 soldiers who feared it. Ragnar Lothbrok wasn't just a king. He was death-given human form. 25 years of constant warfare had transformed him into something beyond normal human capability. His axe work was so precise that enemies often died before realizing they'd been struck. But this wasn't mindless brutality. Every movement was calculated, every strike designed for maximum efficiency. Ragnar had studied the art of killing until he could end lives with the mechanical precision of a master craftsman. Tonight, he would demonstrate why kings across Europe paid tribute rather than face him in battle. Ragnar's companions weren't ordinary raiders. They were hand-picked professionals who had proven themselves in the deadliest battles across Europe. Each man was a specialist in different aspects of warfare, together forming the most lethal small unit in the medieval world. Eric the Silent, master of stealth kills, capable of ending lives without making sound. Bjorn Bloodaxe, berserker, who could maintain tactical control even in killing fury. Gunnar Nightwalker, expert in darkness combat, eyes adapted to fighting blind. Thorvald Deathdealer, weapons master who could kill with any blade or blunt instrument. Each warrior had earned his place through demonstrated ability to kill multiple enemies in single combat. These 10 men had fought together for over a decade. They knew each other's movements so perfectly that they could coordinate deadly attacks without speaking, using only gestures and sounds their enemies would mistake for natural night noises. Their weapons were masterworks designed for their individual fighting styles. Their armor was modified for silent movement. Their minds were focused on a single purpose, turning enemy soldiers into corpses with maximum efficiency. This wasn't a raiding party, it was a death squad. While other warriors fought for glory or treasure, these 10 fought for the pure art of combat mastery. They had developed killing into a science, studying anatomy to learn the fastest ways to end lives, practicing techniques until violence became as natural as breathing. Their philosophy was simple. Every enemy encountered was already dead, merely waiting for the moment when reality caught up with inevitability. They didn't fight battles. They conducted executions on a massive scale. Most importantly, these warriors had mastered something that separated them from every other military force in Europe. They were more dangerous in darkness than in daylight. Years of night raids had given them supernatural ability to fight without sight, using sound, smell, and intuition to locate and kill enemies who couldn't even see their attackers. In darkness, they became something beyond human. They became the living embodiment of every soldier's worst nightmare. At midnight, 10 shadows began moving across the landscape toward Lord Elred's camp. They moved in complete silence, each step calculated to avoid detection by sentries who had grown comfortable in their supposedly secure position. Ragnar led from the front, his massive frame somehow managing to move with the silence of a hunting cat. His companions followed in practiced formation, each man responsible for specific sectors of the approach. The English guards saw nothing, heard nothing, suspected nothing. They were about to learn the difference between feeling safe and actually being safe. The first English soldier died without knowing he was under attack. Eric the Silent emerged from darkness behind the perimeter guard, one hand covering the man's mouth while his seax opened the throat in a single precise cut. The body was lowered silently to the ground, positioned to appear as if the guard had fallen asleep at his post. Within minutes, 3 more sentries had died the same way, their death so quiet that guards 20 yards away noticed nothing. The fortress walls meant to keep Vikings out had become a trap keeping English soldiers in. Now the real artistry began. Moving through the camp required navigating between sleeping soldiers, avoiding areas where firelight might reveal their presence, and maintaining perfect coordination despite limited visibility. Ragnar's men had studied the camp layout for days, memorizing the position of every tent, every fire pit, every latrine. They moved through the enemy position like ghosts, death incarnate walking among the living. The English soldiers slept peacefully, dreaming of home, unaware that their nightmares had taken physical form and were standing over their beds. Before the killing began, each Viking took position for maximum carnage. This wasn't random slaughter. It was precisely orchestrated destruction designed to prevent organized resistance and maximize psychological terror. Ragnar positioned himself near the command tents where officers slept. His companions spread throughout the camp, each responsible for specific sections. When the massacre began, it would happen simultaneously across the entire position. No English soldier would have time to organize defense. No runner would escape to warn nearby forces. No survivor would be able to accurately report what had happened. In the last moments before the slaughter began, Ragnar raised his axe and whispered the traditional Viking prayer before battle. Odin, let my enemies die well, for they go to feed the ravens. His companions performed their own final rituals, checking weapon edges, adjusting armor for maximum mobility, making peace with gods who were about to witness an impossible demonstration of human killing capability. 180 English soldiers continued sleeping, unaware that their last moments of life were measured in heartbeats. The massacre began in complete silence. Ragnar's axe split the skull of Lord Elred, second in command, while the man dreamed of his wife in distant York. Simultaneously, 9 other Vikings began the systematic execution of sleeping soldiers. Seax daggers slid between ribs into hearts. Axes opened throats with surgical precision. Hands covered mouths while blades found vital organs. For the first 10 minutes, the only sounds were the quiet whispers of steel entering flesh. 40 English soldiers died in their sleep, never knowing that death had visited their camp. Each Viking had perfected different methods for ending lives without sound. Eric preferred the throat cut from behind, quick, silent, and certain. Bjorn specialized in the heart thrust through the back, his blade finding the gap between ribs with deadly accuracy. Ragnar's technique was the most brutal. His massive strength allowed him to crush windpipes with his bare hands before finishing with the axe. No scream, no struggle, just the transition from life to death in seconds. This was killing elevated to an art form, death administered with professional efficiency. Tent by tent, bedroll by bedroll, the Vikings worked through the camp with methodical precision. Each death was calculated to maintain silence while ensuring no enemy could wake others or organize resistance. The English camp became a charnel house where living soldiers slept beside fresh corpses. The smell of blood began to fill the air, but darkness concealed the scope of the massacre from anyone still breathing. 90 English soldiers had died without a single one waking to raise alarm. The silence was broken when an English soldier woke to urinate and stepped in his tentmate's blood. His scream of horror pierced the night air, alerting the surviving 90 soldiers that something impossible was happening. Chaos erupted as men woke to find corpses around them, blood soaking the ground, and shadow figures moving through their camp with weapons drawn. The psychological impact was devastating. Many soldiers froze in terror instead of reaching for weapons. The silent phase of the massacre was over. Now came the open slaughter. English soldiers stumbled from their tents into a nightmare. Bodies lay everywhere. Blood reflected firelight like dark mirrors, and Viking warriors emerged from shadows with axes raised and death in their eyes. The psychological advantage was total. Half the English soldiers were already dead. The survivors were disoriented and terrified, and their officers lay in pools of blood. Ragnar's voice cut through the screaming, "English dogs! Tonight you feed the ravens." Now the true impossibility began. 90 surviving English soldiers, professional warriors with weapons and armor, faced 10 Vikings in open combat. By every law of warfare, the English should have overwhelmed their attackers through sheer numbers. Instead, they encountered something beyond their understanding. Warriors who killed so efficiently that numbers became irrelevant. Each Viking was worth 20 ordinary soldiers, and they fought with the fury of men who had already accepted death. The mathematics of normal warfare simply didn't apply. Ragnar became a force of nature unleashed. His axe split shields, shattered swords, and opened bodies with mechanical precision. English soldiers attacked him 3 and 4 at a time, only to find themselves facing a killing machine that moved with impossible speed and struck with devastating power. His first victim died from an axe blow that split him from shoulder to hip. His second lost his head in a single horizontal swing. His third had his chest caved in by the axe handle before the blade opened his throat. 10 English soldiers fell to Ragnar's axe in the first 5 minutes of open combat. While Ragnar carved through enemy ranks, his companions demonstrated why they were legends in their own right. Bjorn entered berserker fury and began killing with both hands, an axe in each fist creating a whirlwind of death. Eric moved like a ghost, appearing behind enemies to open their throats before vanishing into darkness. Gunnar fought blind, relying on sound and instinct to locate targets, his uncanny accuracy making him seem supernatural. Each Viking was surrounded by growing piles of English corpses. Professional soldiers began to break under the psychological pressure of witnessing impossible combat efficiency. Men who had fought in dozens of battles fled in terror from Vikings who killed with mechanical precision. The organized English defense collapsed into individual fights for survival. Soldiers abandoned formations, dropped weapons, and ran for the camp perimeter, only to find that escape routes had been cut off by Viking positioning. What should have been a coordinated defense became a massacre of panicked individuals. The camp became a charnel house. Blood soaked the ground so thoroughly that footing became treacherous. The screams of dying English soldiers mixed with the war cries of Vikings who had become living embodiments of death. Ragnar's kill count climbed toward legend. 20 dead. Yermi Besh Olu, 30 dead. Each English soldier who faced him added to a total that would be remembered for centuries. The 10 Vikings had transformed from warriors into something mythological. They had become death incarnate. With most English soldiers dead or fleeing, Ragnar faced the last organized resistance. 20 veteran soldiers who had formed a defensive circle around their fallen lord's banner. These were England's finest warriors, men who had fought Vikings before and survived. They would not survive tonight. Ragnar approached them like death walking, his axe dripping with the blood of their comrades, his massive frame illuminated by fires burning throughout the devastated camp. The English veterans showed courage, but courage meant nothing against impossible skill. What followed was a demonstration of weapon mastery that transcended normal human capability. Ragnar's axe became an extension of his will, striking with supernatural precision and devastating power. One English veteran lost both arms in a single swing. Another had his spine severed by a blow that cut through mail as if it were cloth. A third was split vertically from skull to groin, his body falling in 2 pieces. The veterans fought bravely, but they faced a warrior who had perfected killing into an art form. Each death added to Ragnar's impossible total. 35 personal kills, 37, 39. Each number represented a life ended by his hand, a warrior who had learned too late that legends are real. The final English soldier, a boy barely old enough to hold a sword, faced Ragnar alone among the corpses of his entire unit. The Viking king looked into terrified young eyes and spoke words that would haunt the survivor forever. "Tell them Ragnar Lothbrok counted 40. The axe fell for the final time." When dawn broke over Lord Elred's camp, the impossible had become reality. 180 English soldiers lay dead, their blood soaking into Yorkshire soil. 10 Vikings stood victorious, their weapons dripping with enemy gore. Ragnar's personal total reached legendary status, 40 men killed by his hand alone. His 9 companions had accounted for the remaining 140, each averaging over 15 personal kills. The mathematics that should have favored the English had been rewritten in blood. As Ragnar surveyed the carnage, he understood that this night had transformed him from successful raider into something mythological. The story of 10 Vikings slaughtering 180 professional soldiers would spread across Europe, carried by the few survivors who had escaped into darkness. Kings would pay tribute rather than face him. Warriors would flee at the mention of his name. The Night of Red Snow had created a legend that would outlive the man. From this dawn forward, Ragnar Lothbrok was no longer just a Viking king. He was death incarnate, the warrior whose name made enemies wake screaming. The rising sun illuminated a scene from nightmare. 180 English corpses lay scattered across the camp, their blood turning the earth into red mud. Weapons, armor, and body parts created a landscape of death that would haunt survivors' memories forever. The 10 Vikings stood among the carnage like gods of war, their weapons and armor painted with enemy blood, their faces showing the satisfaction of warriors who had achieved the impossible. This was how legends were born, in blood, under darkness, through demonstrations of human capability that transcended normal understanding. In Lord Elred's great tent, now serving as their victory hall, the 10 warriors celebrated their impossible achievement. They feasted on English food, drank English wine, and wore English gold torn from the bodies of their enemies. Ragnar sat at the head of the captured table, his axe across his knees, still stained with the blood of 40 men. His companions raised horns of mead to toast the most brutal display of combat mastery in Viking history. The feast lasted until sunset, 10 warriors celebrating a victory that mathematics said was impossible. As they prepared to depart the charnel house they had created, Ragnar looked back at the massacre site one final time. 180 English soldiers had learned the difference between reputation and reality. The story would spread across medieval Europe, the night when 10 Vikings became living nightmares, and Ragnar Lothbrok killed 40 men with his own hands. Kings would hear the tale and understand why tribute was cheaper than war. In the halls of Valhalla, even the gods would raise their horns to salute warriors who had turned impossible odds into legendary massacre. The Night of Red Snow was over, but the legend of Ragnar's bloodiest night would echo through eternity. From the blood-soaked earth of Yorkshire, 10 warriors rode toward immortality, their axes dripping with the proof that some men are born to rewrite the rules of warfare through pure, brutal excellence.